Right. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good.
So Lloyd, tell me about yourself and tell me why you actually came to Hacking Health
Sure.
at eHealth Expo.
All right, okay. So my name is Louis Lee. I'm part of the business intelligence and big data team, Australia, Oracle Australia, based in Brisbane. So I'm here today, Hacking Health, to really see what people do, what people think about, how they actually want to embrace the technology, to come up with some brilliant ideas to help the world and make the world a better place. Right. So I'm here as a mentor. I think that's what the red dot
I think that's what
represents.
that means. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just talking to two different people, different teams, and just trying to see if I can help in any way using data and analytics tool that we have in Oracle.
So what is your background? You talked about analytics and data. What's your background there?
Right. Okay. So my background is in data and analytics. So within Oracle, we have a specialist team looking after data science, big data, information management. So I'm part of that specialist team. Basically, helping customers, using some of those tools and platforms to analyze data in an easier way.
So I've seen a few of these projects that try to get into some data, some interesting patient data, encounter data.
That's right.
So that's what interesting projects have you seen?
Right. So actually, in fact, I think a lot of the thinking behind a lot of projects that the guys actually working on backed up by some sort of data. So there's always that data element in any of the applications, right? So when you look at some of those patient data, people like to sort of look at that information and then sort of drill down into more details and trying to actually come up with some story around how that data relates to some other data elements, right? So for example, there was a couple of teams actually working on disease sort of outbreak. They want to look at the real-time data, so they want to know what happens what's happening throughout the world. So there's some alert system that's happening, and also predicting some of those patterns, right? And because if you have enough data, and if there's a lot of historical data that's behind the scene, you could actually apply some mathematical models and then predict what can potentially happen. And that's really providing that additional information using data science and then really empowering that application to do some really interesting things.
There's other projects there I spoke to around, I think the whole cancer research side.
Right.
And looking not necessarily from the research specifically, but looking at value-based outcomes. A lot of those things in terms of how you feel versus how you are, or the how you feel, is not being captured.
Right.
Because you left the hospital. The doctor doesn't understand the impact at home.
Sure.
Doesn't understand what other aspects to your life. Do you have a family? Do you have kids? Do you have to drive? All those different aspects in terms of those outcomes, which becomes an interesting problem. How do you measure something that you don't necessarily have the data for?
Well, I think when it comes to measurement, you do actually have to have that data, right?
Yeah.
Because everything actually evolves around what sort of information that you have. It may not be a direct connection to some of the data that you're looking at right now, but there will be some sort of a correlation to some of the other data that somehow you have to actually build that relationship with, right? So, one of the team was actually talking about some of the patient records, but then at the same time they want to sort of enrich that data with some of the personal health record, as in like a Fitbit, for example. So even though initially some of those data sets doesn't look like there's a link, but in many cases you can actually find a way to enrich that data. But then eventually, by combining all those data together, you can actually come up with some really interesting insights. So I think it's the process of actually finding the link between those multiple data sets. So initially you start with probably one of your core data. But then, those additional data that's captured as part of maybe some of these applications or using a third-party applications, but eventually when they all come together, things that will actually start to make better sense.
So for us to do that, we still need to have a way of collecting the data.
That's right.
And sometimes that's actually the hardest bit.
That's right. Data capturing, because you will need that data point to analyze that information, right? So, you could, just like you said, capturing data is one thing, and sometimes we are capturing data without actually knowing it, because
What's the example of that?
So, well,
Don't put you on the spot.
no,
there.
no. I'm just trying to think what's the best example, right? Because sometimes you've got certain apps where like you mentioned about My Story, right?
Yeah.
It's an app where you may be actually capturing data about your feeling, for example, right? But maybe you were doing that for some other purposes, right?
Yes.
But that could actually relate to some of the other areas of your interest as well. So it's an indirect capturing of information, but it's out there, right? And you're actually capturing it without you directly capturing for the purpose of it, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. There was a separate discussion that I was talking about, but more from an information security angle.
Sure.
Because if we have our own policies around, okay, here's this app and we're capturing this sensitive information, who's to say that then that particular person is not providing that sensitive piece of information already on a, let's say, for example, a social media channel.
Right.
Then what are you doing in terms of protecting that data that for that particular person is already out there?
Yes, very true, and that's a good point because, for example, like Facebook, right?
Yeah.
You're writing your current feeling towards what's happening right now, and you can actually tell by how you're actually writing some of your status information, and that will directly relate to your current emotional feeling, right?
Yeah, there was all that stuff that we've been doing for years around sentiment analysis.
Social sentiment analysis,
Yeah.
that's right. So that's one example of indirectly capturing your information. You're actually doing that to share your feeling to your family and friends, but you're actually capturing your emotional state at a point in time, right? That could be actually used for some of these other analysis, right? As part of your
For good.
For better word, right? Yeah, but the security in terms of data, is very, very tricky one, right? And I guess everyone, seen, what happened with, like Facebook, sharing that type of information, especially when it becomes a very personal sort of data. What's the boundary, right? How much can you share? Obviously, for sharing for good is what everybody wants. But then when it becomes very personal sort of data, then it becomes a bit of a grey area, right? So
Yeah. And part of the conversation that we were having with My Story was also not just where the data is stored,
right,
but how the data is stored from a contractual perspective.
Sure.
As an example, if we had a company that provided that service, who actually owns the data, and if can I make sure that it's all deleted and all those kind of things.
Yep.
But if that company got bought out by someone else, right? So mergers, acquisitions, that happens.
Which
all
happens
the time.
all the time, yeah.
Right. Then what happens to that contract? What happens to the, like a better term, the ethics or the intent of that contract? What's going to change after that? Because you do have a different organisation.
That's right.
So there's all these kind of things that we're seeing nowadays, how that information is stored, how that information is shared.
That's right.
Even to the point that, hey, we would actually have just the data just stored on your mobile device and not on a cloud per se that would be very convenient to do.
Right.
And then from there, it was like, okay, what happens if you lose that phone? Then you've got those kind of aspects in terms of your personal story and keeping that encrypted. And what if you wanted to back that up somewhere to get that off? There's all these kind of aspects that we're looking through. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy problem to solve, right? But I think we're getting better at that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of organizations are coming up with a particular sort of security rules and conditions to try to address and make it better in terms of data security, right? But I think it's something that as a community we all have to work towards. It's not something that a company would actually set a rule or a particular government put a regulation. It's something that everybody really have to work towards, right?
Cool. Well,
right.
Have fun.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thanks
Great
for
event.
sharing.
Well
done.
It's I think the idea is everybody have fun, right? We actually come up with some crazy ideas, right?
crazy.
Yeah.
We are crazy people.
All right. Good job, Jason.